That's fine.
Hi, my name is Glenn Keller.
Hi, I'm Dimple Shah, and welcome to episode 10 and the very first episode of 2025 of Our Greatest Strength.
Today's guest is Jeff Ton. Jeff Ton, I've known Jeff for a while. So, um, Jeff, can you talk about how we met, and then we could like argue about if that's how we actually met.
Glenn, we've known each other long enough that I think we met at birth or something, didn't we? Uh,
It's been a
I,
while.
I think it was through the Indy CIO network is where we got introduced. We had started that group, 14 years ago, and someone in the group suggested, well, we should invite Glenn Keller, and it's like, well, sure, why not? That seems like a cool guy. So I think we reached out and invited you to join us for the CIO network, and we became fast friends. And I think it was, our approach to leadership, our approach to developing people with that empathetic and compassionate leadership. And I think that's kind of what made us click.
So yeah, and I'd have to agree with that, and that's how I remember us meeting too. Yeah, and I think we both have a similar leadership style or leadership philosophy.
Yep.
So one thing about Jeff, well, actually several things about Jeff. Jeff also he hosts his own podcasts and video casts. He's quite busy. He does lots of speaking, especially on the subject of Lewis and Clark. I'd urge you to listen to one of his or see one of his presentations if you have the chance. And he's written several books, including one that he kind of finished for your mother, right?
Yeah, did a second edition of a book my mom wrote back in 1980.
Yeah, which is just an absolutely fascinating book, and I suggest you either read or listen to it. If you listen to it, it was narrated by Amy Brown, who's
Yeah.
quite well known in our community as well. So one other thing, just to mention about Jeff, Jeff was named by the governor of Indiana as a Sagamore of the Wabash. And in case you're not from this area and you're tuned in, that's basically the highest civilian honor that you can achieve in the state of Indiana. And a lot of us we were super proud of it. It's like, I don't know if you're familiar with mobster movies, it felt like one of our crew got made. So so Jeff is a made man, but
There you go.
yeah, it's quite an unusual award. Very few people get it, and we're so proud of Jeff for getting that.
We are so proud and we are so happy and humbled that Jeff is our guest today. I was actually thinking about this gentleman, and for our viewers, that today morning I was thinking, it's like, how are we going to even introduce Jeff? Like everyone knows him. I mean, certainly everyone in Indy knows him, and I'm sure even outside of Indy. So, yes, thank you for taking that time, Jeff. We have had some amazing guests in the past, and we have a bunch of great guests lined up. But when we were talking about 2025, Glenn and I said, well, first guest, we need someone special.
That's right.
Every guest is just so special to us,
So
and
no pressure here.
2025 was going to be no different,
No
right?
pressure.
No pressure at all. And then I'm like, oh my God, let's reach out to Jeff. So thank you. We really, really do appreciate you agreeing to do this
My
with
pleasure.
Yeah, no pressure at all. Just be wonderful.
us.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, so just kind of some few questions we'd like to throw your way. So can you talk to us about when you first started interacting with immigrants to this country?
Since you send the questions out in advance, I've been thinking a lot about this. And my earliest recollection actually was in the sixth grade, believe it or not.
Wow.
We had a kid in our sixth grade class, Gregory Mukhtar. Gregory and his family, his father was a surgeon, moved to the little community of Lebanon, Indiana, right up I-65 from And that's really the first time that I remember meeting someone who wasn't from here, right? And uh, Gregory was a special part of our class and very talented sixth grader. He played the French horn. I remember he played the French horn, and just quickly became a part of the group of kids that hung around together there in Little Lebanon, Indiana. So that's the first. I guess that's not in a professional setting, but that's the first recollection that I have of someone from a different country.
And so I mean, that kind of you learned something early.
Yeah, I did. And you know, for me, my mom and dad really kind of set the tone, and even my grandmother to a certain extent. We were proud immigrants. The Tuns and the Williams. I mean, you can trace my mother's side clear back to the Mayflower. You can trace my father's side back in a couple of different directions. One of which through Ellis Island. My great grandparents immigrated from what is now part of, I don't even know if Romania exists anymore. It was a little country called Bukovina that doesn't exist anymore. And they immigrated from there. And the Tuns themselves immigrated from the Netherlands through Havre, France, and came over through New York City. So to me, I always grew up knowing the story that the United States was the melting pot of the world, right? We were from all over, and everyone was an immigrant, just about, unless you were a Native American, and then you go back 10,000 years.
Yes.
But to me, it was just natural, I think. But because of my parents and the way that they raised us, they did some missionary work in Nicaragua and El Salvador, and you know, they traveled the world doing mission work from time to time, and it was just part of it.
Thank you.
Um, Amazing. It's what caught my attention, Jeff, is when you said that this is a land of immigrants. For the most part, everyone who's been here since years has been
Yeah.
an immigrant, and just that's so true. I was talking to someone about our little venture over here, and she pointed out, she's like, "Why would you say your country and my country, Dimple? Because when I was new in this country, I would say, well, your country." She's like, this is a land of immigrants and everyone here is immigrants. And I'm like, oh my God, you're right. And ever since I've started talking about, well, I've got two homes. So
Uh-huh. Yeah.
thank you for saying that again. That I appreciate that. So now, ever since your early experience that you shared with us, Jeff, we know for a fact that you've been a greatest ally for immigrants. So how do you take down barriers for immigrants that might not have as many resources available to them, as an ally?
Well, I think you use the resources that you have, right? I mean, Glenn mentioned that I used to do a podcast, and so on that podcast, we interviewed people from all over the world. I think you were on the program, right, Dimple, as well
Yes.
as Nirav. And so it's using your platforms and using the resources that you have to help others, whether it's a job recommendation, a letter of recommendation written on someone's behalf, or my favorite thing is to introduce people to each other and see where those connections go. So I think the best way to be an ally is to think about the resources that you have, that I have, and how can those resources be used to help someone else um, um, become part of the culture, bring their culture to bear. I think I'm jumping around a little bit here, but one of the things that I learned through my work at Thompson Multimedia, we were a French-owned company. And so at one point in my career, I had staff on 5 or 6 different continents. They were in Europe, they were in France, they were in Asia, they were in India, they were in that foreign country called California. I mean, they were all over the place, right? Deptford, New Jersey. And one of the things that I learned very quickly is that there was power in our cultures, our different cultures, and being able to share our different cultures with each other made us all stronger, better employees, people. We did, when I was with Thompson, one of the projects that I worked on was an outsourcing project. We actually outsourced our application development to Capgemini in Mumbai, India. And I can remember when we first started the implementation part of the project, I asked the Capgemini folks, we need to learn their culture. We need to understand the culture of the people. And they said, no, 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 you don't need to. They'll learn yours. And it's like, no, that's not the way to do it. So we took several trips to Mumbai to see what they saw, to understand where they lived and how they worked, and that made us able to relate on so much better level than we were relating to before. So to me, it's about the blending of not. I don't want to use the word blending of cultures. It's the cultures coming together to augment each other.
Love it. Wow.
Yeah.
That's what I call going above and beyond.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that.
So, with these interactions, what would you say was the most interesting thing you learned?
Oh, wow. You know, I can tell a couple of stories. Uh, the one that comes to mind, back to those days of traveling to India, many of those folks that we met during that time became immigrants later on as part of the project. They came to the U.S., but it was seeing their world through their eyes, right? We can see it as an American landing at the Mumbai airport and seeing what we saw, but we had to really experience it through their eyes. And what I took from that when later some of the team immigrated here was to take the time to talk about what they were seeing through our eyes, rather than just what they were seeing. What did it mean? Why was this way? Why was that way? So I think that kind of answers your question. Um, I will say that one of the most touching moments I think that I've had is when I was at Goodwill. We had a gentleman, Muhammad Mata. Muhammad was from, he'll kill me because I can't remember, Jordan, I believe. Um, anyway, he immigrated here to the United States and he couldn't get a job. So he was working at Goodwill in the retail stores because that's the only job he could get. And I met him and found out that his background was in IT. Well, oh my God, I could use people in IT that know IT, right? And so I brought Mohammed into the IT department as part of our team. And one of the most honorable things that I had the opportunity to do was to sit in the audience the day he became a citizen of the United States. It was just amazing to be able to participate in that and be there.
Cool.
There were several of us that went to support him in what he was doing because that's not easy to do.
No, it's not.
That's what makes you a fantastic ally, Jeff. So you talk about these stories going to India and learning their cultures and things like that. And have you faced any difficulties? Like, when interacting with immigrants, like language barriers or something about the culture that you probably can't digest or they don't understand? What's been the most difficult part for you?
You know, probably the most difficult sometimes is language barrier.
Mhm.
And it's not even at times the accents can be difficult to parse the words out. But colloquialisms don't translate, right? It's you say something and you don't even realize that you're using slang or a colloquialism, and the person just looks at you like you got four heads because they have no idea what you just said. And I'm drawing a blank on a specific example of that, but and that goes both ways, right? It's those things that we take for granted that when we say it has this other meaning, and everybody knows that other meaning except someone who's not from around here or from around there. And
Mhm.
I think that's the one of the most difficult things. One of the things that we ran into with the outsourcing is that one of the things that we quickly learned is that when someone on our team that was from Mumbai shook their head like this, it did not mean they agree with you. It means they hear you.
Yes, they acknowledge.
And we thought it meant they were agreeing. And it's like, no, they were not. And you had to get used to that, right? That's a gesture or a mannerism that means something else. And so you just have to, that's part of getting to know each other and getting to know each other's cultures and getting beyond the surface, I think is so important.
Yeah. And I bet you learned it the hard way. Yeah,
Yes, yes, we
agree.
did. Yes. And I'm agreeing with you. Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
I've gotten blown up by colloquialisms so many
Yeah.
times, you know, and but it's sometimes it's like a wonderful um opportunity to have a conversation
Oh,
because
yeah,
the
absolutely.
person will say, uh, what did you mean by this? Scare the paint off a barn,
Uh-huh.
whatever stupid thing it was you said, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Yeah.
and then and then so you both learn something.
yep.
You learn not to say that anymore, and
I-
they
I'll
and they
I'll tell
learn
you
about what it
though,
means.
you have to get burned by that so many times before you gather up that courage to ask them. Like 20 years almost, it'll be 20
Oh,
years
I
in
bet.
this country. And
Yeah,
now since the past few years, I'm gathering up courage to appear dumb. I'm like, okay, Glenn, I have
What do
no
you
idea
mean
what
by
you just
that?
said. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I still don't know so many
Well,
slang
Glenn, and
words.
I know, Glenn, you're a writer also, and I don't know if you do this, but I've started in my writing, whenever I'm going to use a colloquialism, I look it up to find out where's the origin, what's it really mean? Am I using it right? Because we get used to using them, and
oh
sometimes
yeah,
they mean something totally different than you thought they did.
oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's true. Yeah, so Dimple, Jeff and I could probably give you a long list of colloquialisms that we've misused that,
Oh, please.
yeah.
Yes. And I'm sure that even after I memorize that list, there'll be
Yeah,
something
yeah,
else that comes
yeah.
my way.
So Jeff, what do you wish everyone knew about working with immigrants to this country?
Oh, I know I keep going back to this, but to me, it's the beauty of our cultures, and that when you take the time to get to know someone, and get to know the way that they celebrate holidays, the way they celebrate family, just get to know them at that cultural level. It's just first of all, it's beautiful, right? To learn the stories, and to learn what makes people who they are, because we're all a product of our cultures growing up. And to me, it's those sharing of the stories that is so important. And I just love that. I find so much joy and reward in understanding those things. And I wish everybody would take the time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, we talked about how United States of America is a land of immigrants, right, from all over the world. Have you ever experienced or observed that one part of immigrants or immigrants coming from one part of the world are treated differently than immigrants who come in from different part of the world?
Oh, absolutely. I think that happens. I think that happens all the time.
Why do you think that is?
Unfortunately, I think it's. I think it gets sometimes it gets down to skin color and race. The those that immigrate from African nations, I think, are treated differently than those that immigrate from France or England, or wherever. And so I think there's a lot of that depending on where people come from. I think they still run into that. I mean, we're all old enough to remember 9/11, and if you came from a Muslim country, you were not treated well, and that still holds true, right?
Yeah.
Depending on what religion you practice. And I think that you're treated differently by your neighbors, you're treated differently by your coworkers, you're treated differently by the government. And it shouldn't be that way in a perfect world, but yes, you run into that all the time.
And one of our very earlier guests, Dr. Wael Ali, he shared his experience on our interview that he still has issues when he travels at the airport
Yeah.
because of where he comes from and because of his name and such. And Gail Farnsley, another person we interviewed in our earlier episode, she said something very similar to you said, that no one takes her as an immigrant because of the way she looks.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
and thinking about all those things, I feel like it's just so beautiful that we do. It reminds us time and again, Glenn and I keep talking about that
Yeah.
hopefully we should continue this forever.
Well, and I can remember, gosh, it was back in what was it, 2020, with the George Floyd murder and all of that was going on. And one of the things one of the programs that the CIO group started to get into was to again use our platform to raise up voices. And I can remember talking, and I know you both know Mike Gill. I can remember talking to Mike Gill, and he's saying, "Well, what about Indians? What about Asians? We need to raise their voices up." And it's like, I hadn't even considered that, right? It didn't even occur to me until Mike said something. And it's like, yeah, you're right. We need voices from all across the spectrum. So I think we ended up doing a panel that Mike was on, as well as several others. And I just think it's important that you bring as many voices together so you get those different perspectives. The problems that we're facing in business, the problems we're facing in society are so complex that in order to solve them, we need diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of culture to attack these problems. And I think that's what we need to do to bring people together.
Good.
Into that.
So, thank you. So, before we close, Jeff, is there anything that you kind of wish we would have asked you that maybe is on your mind you'd like to talk about immigration?
Well, you didn't ask about Lewis and Clark. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, should I ask you on camera or off camera that when you mentioned that earlier, I had no idea what you were talking about?
No, fine, go ahead.
So Lewis and Clark. So they were explorers in the early 1800s. And when the United States acquired the Louisiana Purchase, which was all the land, most of the lands west of the Mississippi, they were sent out by Thomas Jefferson to explore that territory and come back and report what they found. And so they were the first people of European white descent to travel across the continent to the Pacific Ocean and back. And it's an amazing, incredible story, and it's one that we don't really associate with immigrants much, but when you think about it, they were traveling through other people's lands, and they they don't survive without the support and the help of the Native American tribes that they run into. They formed an ecosystem of these various tribes and formed friendships with these various tribes, and it could have gone dramatically different had they gone in with a different approach. And even on the expedition itself, they were not afraid to look for talent in unconventional places. Um, they had uh, they had York, Clark's African American slave, that went with them, became a full member of the party very quickly, and was sent out to explore on his own, carried a rifle, many things he would not be able to do back in his hometown of Louisville. They had some men that were part Shawnee, part French Canadian. So they would have been looked down on in many of the cities as half breeds. And then, of course, the famous Sacagawea, the young Indian girl who was 16 or 17 years old when they met her. And she went on that journey from near present day Bismarck, North Dakota, to the Pacific Ocean and back with a newborn baby on her back. Talk about an amazing, amazing woman. But she had a skill that the captains knew they would need when they got to the coast, got to the Rocky Mountains. They knew that they would need someone who spoke Shoshone, and that she was a Shoshone Indian, so she knew the language. So they actually hired her husband because you couldn't hire her. They hired her husband so that he would bring her along, um, and as an interpreter. So even my joke of Lewis and Clark, there are lessons in there for immigrants and for looking for skills and cultures beyond your own.
Wow, I'm glad I asked that question then. Right. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
My Hey, I could talk Lewis and Clark all day long. Just ask Glenn.
It's fun to listen to.
So yes, going back to the original question Glenn had, Jeff, is there anything else you would share with us that we haven't asked you already?
I think that was it. I think for your listeners, and when you think about the title of your podcast, Our Greatest Strength, to me, our greatest strength is each other, and learning from each other, and bringing each other's cultures, and understanding them, and using that to make us all better. That's what I love about your podcast. When I first heard the title, it's like, well, our greatest strength. What's my greatest strength, right? But it's the greatest strength is each other and bringing that together.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you for that feedback.
Yeah. And Jeff, thank you very much for being our guest today.
My pleasure.
It was fascinating to have you here. Really appreciate it.
Yes, I wish we could talk to Jeff forever. I mean, do we really have to end? Thanks again, Jeff, for being here. Really, we much appreciate you and your time and everything that you shared with us.
Well, I appreciate both of you as colleagues, as friends, as part of my network, and I think the work that you're doing with this podcast is very important. So thank you for the honor of being on your podcast today.
You're welcome, and thank you. So
Thank-
thank you to our viewers for tuning in, and thank you for listening to this episode. Don't forget to subscribe because, as Dimple mentioned, we have a lot of cool guests besides Jeff coming up in 2025. So thanks and goodbye.
Thanks again for watching. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.